My child, this is imparted, and I need you to stay with me for a moment. Before your thoughts rush ahead or persuade you to move on, let these words settle into your heart. You have won, even if that victory has never looked the way you imagined, and only a few will truly understand what that means. Many will keep scrolling because they are weary, distracted, or afraid of what clarity might ask of them. But somehow you are still here, and that matters. This is serious because the direction of your life is shaped by what you understand in moments like this. I'm not asking you to remain because I want to control you, but because understanding can be ignored, and what is ignored often returns as confusion. You are here for a reason, not because you are greater than anyone else, but because your heart paused long enough to recognize the weight of this moment. Before you searched for answers, I had already prepared this moment for you. Something inside you sensed there was more here than ordinary words could explain. You felt the gravity before your mind could give it a name, and I speak to you now with both truth and love. Your life depends on hearing this, not because disaster is waiting around the corner, but because what you understand today will shape every step you take tomorrow. Do not hurry past this message, because you survived what was meant to bring your journey to an end. And before you move forward, you need to understand why. You have called it survival. You have called it luck. You have called it endurance. Yet you have never fully called it victory, because while you were living through the battle, you could only feel its weight, its pressure, its exhaustion, and its confusion. You could not see how close the darkness came, or how many unseen boundaries kept it from reaching farther than it did. You came closer than you realize. There were seasons when your heart carried more than you ever admitted, and there were thoughts you never found the words to speak aloud. I saw the nights when you whispered to yourself, "Just one more day," and I saw the mornings when you rose again, even though your strength felt thin. What you walked through was never ordinary, even if you convinced yourself that everyone carried the same burden. Many would have lost themselves along that narrow road. Many would have surrendered their hope or forgotten who they truly were. Yet you are still here, still listening, and still willing to receive. That is not an accident. You prevailed because you did not become someone you were never meant to become. And even when disappointment invited bitterness into your heart, you chose another path. You held on to truth when comfort seemed easier. You remained present instead of disappearing behind numbness, even when hiding felt like the simpler choice. Those decisions were quiet, almost invisible to everyone around you. No applause followed them, yet they became the reason you are still standing today. Only a few will recognize what this really means, because most people never stop long enough to ask why they survived. They rush back into noise, familiar habits, and constant distraction because reflection feels heavy. Reflection asks honest questions. Reflection carries responsibility. Reflection changes the way a person lives, and that is why so many avoid it. But you paused. Even now, you are still here, and that tells me you are ready to understand what this moment is truly about. Your life depends on this message, because clarity changes direction. Without it, you would continue carrying yesterday's fears, yesterday's doubts, and yesterday's misunderstandings into tomorrow. You would mistake purpose for pressure and prepare yourself for a battle that has already been overcome. I will not allow that after everything you have endured. You survived what was meant to end you, not because you were untouchable, but because you were protected. There were limits placed on what could reach you. There were moments when unseen help stood where you could not, and there were delays you called frustration that quietly kept you from stepping into harm. Protection rarely announces itself. Often it simply leaves you alive, changed, and wondering why you no longer see life the same way. Now that you have won, the way you live must also change. This change does not come through fear or performance, but through awareness. Victory carries responsibility, not the burden of proving yourself, but the invitation to live honestly. Stop diminishing what you survived. Stop telling yourself it was nothing. Stop walking as though danger still surrounds you when you have already been brought into a place of safety. Say, "My soul is yours, God, forever, if you live for His glory." Many people will ignore these words because it feels easier to believe that life is random than to accept that survival carries meaning. Meaning asks you to pay attention. Meaning asks you to slow down. Meaning invites you to choose differently. Many stay busy because awareness feels costly, but you remain here, And that is why these words are for you. I need you to understand this before you continue forward, because movement without understanding often leads back to the same places. The same struggles begin to repeat. The same questions return. Peace feels delayed, and something always seems unfinished. This message brings something to completion. It closes a chapter you have carried without ever knowing how to describe it. You won, but your victory never looked like celebration. It looked like endurance. It looked like restraint. It looked like remaining gentle in a season that tried to make you hard. It looked like choosing honesty when pretending would have been easier, and choosing life when simply continuing felt heavy. Many mistake victory for outward success, but few recognize the quiet miracle of being preserved. I did not protect you so you could return to living without awareness. I did not carry you through that season so you would dismiss everything it shaped within you. I preserved you because what lies ahead requires the depth that has been formed in you through every difficult season. Do not rush beyond this understanding. Stay here long enough for your heart to receive it, because you deserve to know that what you believed was only survival was, in truth, a quiet triumph. You deserve to move forward with confidence instead of constant uncertainty. You deserve to walk without expecting everything around you to collapse. Moments like this are rare because true awareness is rare. Many spend an entire lifetime without ever understanding why they survived what they survived. They continue moving without allowing those experiences to transform the way they live. But I will not let that be your story. You stopped for a reason. You are still here for a reason. What you understand today will shape the choices you make tomorrow. It will reshape what you accept, how you see yourself, and how you step into the future. Not all at once, but steadily, quietly, and deeply. Stay with me a little longer. Let the weight of these words settle gently into your heart, not as fear, but as reverence for everything you have just come through. You have won, and before you take another step, you need to understand what that victory truly means. This is serious because your life was never meant to be explained by chance, by luck, or by your own strength alone. Listen carefully and let these words unfold slowly within you. Your survival became so quiet that, over time, you began to treat it as something ordinary. You told yourself you were simply strong enough, careful enough, or fortunate enough to make it through. Yet there were moments when your life could have turned in a completely different direction. Moments when the weight upon your shoulders could have crushed your spirit, and moments when despair stood much closer than you ever allowed yourself to admit. You were here because you were protected, not because you escaped untouched. There were dangers you never recognized because they never reached you. There were roads you never walked because something delayed your steps, and there were decisions held back just long enough to keep you from harm. You called those moments coincidence. You thought that was simply how life unfolded, but I was there, placing boundaries where your eyes could not see, limiting what was allowed to reach you, and holding back what would have taken more from you than you could have endured. You came closer to emotional collapse than you care to remember. There were seasons when your heart felt fragile beneath the strength everyone else believed they saw. You carried on through routine and responsibility, telling yourself to keep moving, to stay quiet, and to make as little of your pain as possible. You rarely let anyone see how heavy it truly was, and you seldom asked for help in ways others could recognize. But I saw every burden you carried. I saw the nights when your thoughts would not become still and sleep seemed far away. I saw the mornings when you opened your eyes already exhausted, and I saw the moments when giving up felt like the most reasonable choice. Even when no one else knew how close you were to the edge, I never looked away. If this message is encouraging your heart and drawing you closer to God, you can support this work through the QR code or the support link provided in the description. Your support helps continue sharing messages that strengthen faith and bring encouragement to others. You were fighting battles you did not yet have words to describe. They were rarely loud, and they did not always arrive as obvious crises. Sometimes they came through slow erosion, constant pressure, and quiet doubts that slowly chipped away at your sense of purpose. At other times they appeared as isolation, misunderstanding, or the silent feeling that you were carrying more than anyone realized. None of those seasons were meaningless. There were times when your endurance was tested, your identity was challenged, and your hope was stretched beyond what you thought you could bear. Spiritual battles surrounded you, even when you could not recognize them for what they were. Those attacks did not always appear as chaos. Sometimes they looked like numbness. Sometimes they sounded like discouragement, with no clear explanation. Sometimes they whispered that your life mattered less than someone else's, that your efforts were too small, or that your survival was ordinary. Those thoughts were never harmless. They slowly tried to convince you that your staying no longer mattered. If everything had been left to chance, you would never have remained where you are today. There were decisions that could have led to years of unnecessary pain, relationships that could have consumed your heart, and paths that appeared promising while quietly emptying you from within. There were days when despair could have persuaded you to stop caring altogether. Yet those outcomes never became your story because I intervened in ways you could not see. I sheltered you from decisions you were not prepared to make. I led you away from places that would have wounded something precious within you. I even allowed discomfort to move you away from what felt familiar, because familiar was not always safe. What felt like interruption often became protection. What looked like disappointment became mercy, even though you could not see it at the time. You came close to losing yourself emotionally. You learned how to function while your heart was hurting. You learned how to smile when you felt empty, and you learned how to keep moving while everything inside you felt unsettled. Those survival habits carried you through difficult days, but they also hid how close you truly came to breaking. I saw that fragile place. I knew how thin the distance was between continuing and collapsing, and I remained beside you. There were seasons when everything slowed without explanation, when your plans unraveled and your momentum suddenly disappeared. You believed those moments meant you were failing, yet those delays became barriers placed there for your protection. Moving faster would have cost you more than you understood, and slowing your steps kept you from entering places that would have demanded more than you were able to give. This message carries urgency because you can no longer tell yourself that what you survived was insignificant. When you minimize your survival, you become careless with the life that was preserved for you. You did not simply endure difficult seasons. You were preserved through them. Preservation carries responsibility, not the pressure to perform, but the invitation to live with awareness and honesty. You were never spared because you were perfect. You were spared because your life carries meaning. What you are becoming matters, and your presence in this world has value. You are not interchangeable. You are not disposable. The very fact that you are still here is evidence that your life has been held with intentional care. Even in the moments when you felt completely alone, there were unseen hands guiding your steps. There were limits placed on how far despair was allowed to reach, and there were thoughts that never took root because they were stopped before they could settle in your heart. You only know the story as you lived it, the story where you survived, but you do not know how many darker endings were quietly interrupted along the way. For a long time you believed your own strength was the reason you made it through. Your strength mattered, but it cannot fully explain why you are still here. There were days when your strength had already run out, yet somehow you kept going. There were days when courage felt distant, when hope seemed almost gone, and still you remained. That was never an accident. This matters because now that you have reached this place, you need to understand that your life was preserved for a reason. It is not a reason that calls for noise or dramatic displays, but one that invites awareness, care, and a different way of living. You cannot continue walking as though you are still trapped in the fight for survival. When the battle that once threatened your life has already been restrained, you are protected from becoming hardened by your pain, from surrendering your compassion, and from allowing justified bitterness to define your heart. Those protections did not happen by chance. They were sustained, guarded, and they mattered. That is why I speak to you with such seriousness. When you truly understand your survival, it changes the way you live. It changes what you accept, how you care for yourself, and how deeply you recognize the value of your own life. You are here with purpose. Along your journey, there were moments when one path could have led somewhere entirely different from another. You did not always recognize those moments as they happened. Sometimes you were simply slowed down, redirected, or unsettled enough to stop for a while. Those pauses became protection, even if you never discovered exactly what they saved you from. You do not need every detail in order to honor the truth. This message carries urgency because awareness must come before you keep moving forward. If you continue living as though your survival was ordinary, you may find yourself returning to the same environments and patterns that once threatened your heart. That is not because you are weak. It is because forgetting makes people careless. You were never meant to be overcome by the weight that tried to crush you. You were never meant to believe the lie that your life no longer mattered. You were never meant to experience every attack at its full strength, because protection stood between you and far more than you realized. So stop calling it luck. Stop calling it coincidence. Stop telling yourself that anyone would have made it through what you endured. Many did not, and many do not. You are still here, and that matters. These words are meant to steady your heart, not fill it with fear. They are meant to help you honor the life you have been given, and to understand that being preserved invites purpose rather than pressure. Purpose begins with understanding. You're still here because I guarded you when you never knew you needed guarding. I steadied you when your footing was uncertain. I limited the damage when you were vulnerable, and I carried you through moments you could never have survived by yourself. Now that you understand this, you can begin living differently. You no longer need to question whether your life has value. You no longer need to dismiss your endurance as though it meant very little. You no longer need to rush past what you survived as though it were insignificant. This is serious because your life was spared, and that truth deserves your full attention. You were never forgotten. You were protected. Before you take another step, carry that truth with you, not as fear, but with deep reverence for the life that was preserved when it could have been lost. You are still here, and that has never been an accident. You won a battle you did not even realize you were fighting. When you hear the word battle, your mind may picture something loud, obvious, and unmistakable. Yet the war you faced arrived quietly. It came through exhausting thoughts, relentless pressure, and a weariness that seemed to linger without explanation. Because it was so quiet, you underestimated what was happening. You believed you were simply tired. You believed you were only stressed. You believed life had simply become difficult. Yet there was more taking place than you could see. Type Jesus if his faithfulness has remained your constant hope. You were fighting for your identity. The attacks did not begin by telling you to give up. They began with questions about your worth, about whether your life truly mattered, and about whether your journey was leading anywhere meaningful. Little by little, those questions tried to become conclusions. They whispered that you were falling behind, that you could be replaced, and that your presence made little difference. Those thoughts were never random. They were trying to wear away the truth of who you are. You were also fighting for hope, not through overwhelming despair, but through slow discouragement. Delays tested your heart. Unanswered prayers stretched your patience. Watching others move ahead while you remained waiting challenged your expectations. Repeated struggles tempted you to believe that change would never come. You felt that temptation, yet something within you refused to let go completely. You were fighting for your faith as well, not merely your beliefs, but your trust in my presence. Silence tested you. Waiting tested you. The absence of clear answers tested you. You wondered whether faith was always meant to feel so quiet and so difficult. You questioned whether continuing to trust still made sense when understanding seemed far away. Those questions did not make you weak. They became the very place where your faith grew from assumption into endurance. You were also in a battle for endurance itself. The goal was never to make you fall all at once. It was to wear you down little by little, until continuing seemed meaningless, until weariness convinced you that giving up was the only way to find rest. You felt that exhaustion deeply, yet you remained. Victory in this kind of battle rarely resembles outward success. It does not always come with achievement, applause, or obvious resolution. Sometimes victory looks like simply getting out of bed when you did not want to. Sometimes it looks like continuing to show up after your motivation has faded. Sometimes it looks like refusing bitterness and choosing honesty instead of pretending everything is fine. That is not a small thing. That is victory. You did not realize you were winning because you expected victory to feel different. You expected relief, celebration, or a clear ending to the struggle. Yet battles like these often end quietly. They end when those attacks no longer hold authority over your heart, even if they still try to speak. They end when every passing thought no longer defines you. They end when you are still standing, still open, and still alive within. Some of the deepest attacks against you came through comparison. You looked at the lives of other people and wondered why their road appeared smoother, clearer, or faster than yours. You questioned whether you had missed something, or whether you were doing something wrong. Comparison tried to persuade you that you were missing what everyone else seemed to have, but its purpose was to pull your attention away from the work being done within you. Even so, you never completely surrendered to it. You questioned those thoughts instead of accepting them, and you refused to let them become your identity. That quiet resistance mattered more than you realized. There were also attacks against your sense of purpose. You wondered whether your daily efforts truly mattered, or whether anyone would notice if you simply stopped trying. Those thoughts were never empty or meaningless. They were slowly pulling at your connection to purpose. Yet even when purpose felt distant, you continued to live with integrity. You continued to care for others, and you continued choosing kindness when it would have been easier to become indifferent. That was victory, even if no one around you recognized it. There were seasons when the battle came through numbness. Your emotions felt far away. Joy seemed faded, and at times you hardly recognized yourself. Numbness is not always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it is the heart protecting itself after carrying too much for too long. Yet numbness can also become a place where a person quietly stops participating in life. You did not remain there. You noticed what was happening, you searched for understanding, and you resisted disappearing into endless distraction. That awareness kept your heart from becoming lost. You were also fighting a battle that stretched your patience. Waiting became its own trial. The absence of clear answers tested you, and you longed to know when things would finally change, when understanding would come, and when relief would arrive. Patience was stretched far beyond comfort, yet patience is more than simply waiting. It is endurance that continues moving with quiet faithfulness, and you endured without allowing hardship to harden your heart. That is rare. There was another battle that tried to redefine what strength meant. It whispered that strength meant never asking for help, never admitting weakness, never feeling exhausted, and never questioning anything. Yet what you learned was deeper than that. You learned that true strength can acknowledge struggle without surrendering to it. You learned to keep moving forward while respecting your own limits. That is not weakness. It is wisdom that has been shaped through hardship. You did not always feel courageous. There were moments when fear was real, uncertainty lingered, and you wondered whether you could continue. Courage was never the absence of those feelings. It was your decision to remain present, even while carrying them. You stayed engaged with your life. You refused to disappear completely. Those repeated choices, made one day at a time, became the victories that won battles like these. So stop minimizing what you have lived through. Stop telling yourself it was only another difficult season. Stop assuming that everyone carries these same battles in the same way. Many people emerge from hardship with hearts that have become bitter, distant, or disconnected. You were wounded. You became tired, yet you were never destroyed. That is victory. You were protected throughout the fight. There were boundaries placed around you that you could never see. There were limits set on how far those attacks were allowed to go. Even when you believed you were facing everything alone, I was guarding what mattered most: your heart, your identity, and your ability to keep hoping. The battle tried to make you disappear from within, to leave you emotionally distant and indifferent, but it did not succeed. Instead, you remained present. You continued to feel deeply. You kept reflecting instead of becoming numb, and you stayed aware even when awareness was painful. That willingness to remain present carried you farther than you understood. You prevailed because you did not abandon yourself. You held on to truth instead of surrendering to exhaustion. You stayed long enough for growth to take place, even before you could recognize it. Victory does not always arrive with relief. Sometimes it feels like a quiet steadiness after a long season of chaos. Sometimes it feels like finally taking a deep breath you did not realize you had been holding. Sometimes understanding arrives long after the hardest days have passed. You are only now beginning to recognize that what you once called survival was, in fact, victory. You are still here. You are still listening. Your heart is still open. Those simple truths reveal more than you know. You won a battle you never fully recognized while you were living through it. And now that you understand that, you no longer need to see yourself as someone who barely survived. You can recognize yourself as someone who endured, who resisted, and who remained. That understanding changes the way you move forward. You are not weak because the journey was difficult. You are strong because you stayed. You are not behind because your path required time. You are here with your heart still intact, and that matters. The battle did not take from you what it intended to take, and that truth deserves to be remembered. Only a few will truly understand what is being said here, and I want you to hear why, without pride, guilt, or fear. This is not about being better than anyone else. It is about being ready. Readiness is usually quiet. It is formed through experience, through suffering, through honest reflection, and through the seasons when life removed what was unnecessary until only what was genuine remained. Many people spend their entire lives without slowing down enough to receive truth at this depth. That does not make them less valuable. It simply means they are walking through a different season. Understanding is never given to impress people. It is given to bring the heart into alignment. Truth like this asks for a heart that has been softened instead of hardened. It calls for humility rather than certainty, and for discernment instead of noise. Most people do not turn away from truth because they are careless or evil. Often they are simply overwhelmed, distracted, or afraid of what truth may uncover within them. Sometimes avoidance feels safer than facing what is real. You are not here because you are greater than anyone else. You are here because you stayed when it would have been easier to leave. You kept asking honest questions when others escaped into distraction. You allowed pain to become a teacher instead of allowing it to harden your heart. Those choices prepared you to receive what might feel overwhelming to someone whose heart is not yet ready. Spiritual separation is never about exclusion. It is about awareness, and awareness grows gradually. It cannot be forced or hurried. When truth reaches a heart before it is ready, it often feels threatening. But when truth arrives after awareness has been formed, it brings clarity, peace, and understanding. Many people are still walking through seasons where survival depends on staying distracted. Noise helps them cope. Constant movement keeps them from feeling what their hearts are carrying. If they were asked to receive truth at this depth today, it would feel overwhelming instead of helpful. Discernment is the quiet ability to recognize something significant without needing it to be loud, and that is what happened here. Something within you recognized the weight of this moment before you could fully explain it. You sensed the seriousness without being driven by panic. That is how discernment often speaks. It does not demand attention with volume. It gently invites the heart to pause, and you chose to pause. That simple decision is what separates readiness from avoidance. Perhaps part of you wonders why you are hearing these words while others are not. Let that question rest. You have taken nothing away from anyone else, and you have not arrived here by stepping ahead of someone else's journey. You walked your own road, endured your own seasons, and reached this moment through experiences that shaped your heart. Others will receive what they need when the time is right for them. Timing is not favoritism. It is mercy. Truth always carries responsibility, which is why it is never given carelessly. Responsibility is not meant to feel like a burden. It is the awareness that begins to shape the way you live, the way you choose, and the way you honor everything you have survived. Many people are still learning how to heal. They are still discovering how to stand again and how to feel without becoming overwhelmed. You are still growing as well, but you have reached a place where you can receive understanding without losing your peace or misunderstanding what it asks of you. You are ready to hold truth without turning it into pressure, and that matters. I do not reveal these things to separate you from others. I reveal them so your heart can come into alignment. At first, alignment may feel lonely because it changes what you notice. You begin to see things that once escaped your attention. Noise becomes less appealing. Rushing no longer feels natural. Your heart becomes more sensitive to what is genuine. That sensitivity is not weakness. It is growing awareness. Many people move past moments like this because stopping interrupts what feels familiar. Routine feels comfortable. Distraction can seem safe. Yet safety that depends on avoidance cannot truly sustain you. You chose presence instead of convenience, and presence opens the door to understanding. This message is not meant to separate you from other people. It is meant to give you a steadier foundation. Understanding allows you to walk among others without being carried by their opinions or their pace. You can love people deeply without losing yourself. You can listen with compassion without carrying every burden as your own. You can remain engaged without needing constant approval from those around you. You may begin to notice that some conversations feel different now. Things that once held your attention may no longer satisfy your heart, and certain kinds of noise may feel heavier than they once did. That is not pride. It is discernment reshaping what your soul desires. You are learning to recognize what truly nourishes your spirit and what simply fills your attention. That understanding will serve you in the days ahead. At this stage, responsibility looks quiet rather than dramatic. It looks like honoring what you have survived instead of dismissing it. It looks like choosing environments that encourage healthy growth. It looks like pausing before acting and listening for alignment instead of chasing approval. These are gentle changes, yet they shape the direction of an entire life. You are not required to explain this understanding to everyone around you. Truth does not need to be defended, it needs to be lived. People will often notice your steadiness long before they understand where it comes from. When the time is right, you will know whether to speak or to remain silent, and discernment will guide that decision. Do not feel responsible for carrying others farther than they are prepared to go. Compassion does not require overextending yourself. Love does not force understanding. You can care deeply for people without trying to awaken every heart at once. I will take care of the timing. You simply remain faithful to the alignment I have given you. Only a few will truly understand this message, because only a few are ready to receive it without becoming overwhelmed. That readiness was not earned through privilege or entitlement. It was shaped through endurance, refined through reflection, and formed through experience rather than ease. Right, Lord, I give you everything I am, if His presence completes you. And share this video